To begin creation of our house, we must first import the floor plan from your P drive. If you open up your P drive and navigate to the folder marked House 4, you'll see there are 4 different pictures you can use. You have the first and second floor plan, you have the actual rendering of the house, as well as a side view. We're going to want to use our first floor of our house. So we can't bring it in from our picture end. What we must do is go to our File, Import, navigate to that same folder, select the first floor, and bring it in. You'll notice it's nice and small, and we'll go to our orange point and drop it off. Then you want to move up to the left without holding your mouse and click again. Doesn't matter so much what the size is here, as we'll adjust it in a moment using our tape measure tool. I'm going to get our select tool and move Jill over to the left so she's here. Now's a good time to make sure we have the proper toolbars. You want to make sure you have your getting started toolbar on the left and your views toolbar above the top. In order to verify this, we'll go up to our view menu, toolbars, and you want to make sure you have large tool set selected as well as your large toolbars. Views menu. Now we're going to go up to our views menu. We're going to press the house, which just gives us the top view. This is so we look directly down over the top of our floor plan so we can see our measurements, which we will need to resize the drawing. As you can tell now from the size of Jill, who is to scale, this house is too small to build right now. What we're going to do is use our tape measure tool from our top view and pick a measurement that we know. In this case, we know that this side, based upon this measurement, is 30 feet long. With our tape measure tool, I'm going to zoom into the top. I want to select the area where the black starts to become blurry in this gray area. It doesn't have to be exact, but get it as close as you can. I'll click one time and let go, moving my mouse, zooming out, and now zooming in and trying to get the same area where the black meets the gray. Click again, and before you touch any other buttons, we want to enter the distance that we want this edge of the house to become. I'm going to press 30 feet, which you should see come up in the bottom right hand corner, and press enter. It asks you if you want to resize the model, but it says note the components within the model and load it from the external files will not be resized, aka Jill. When I hit OK and zoom back out, you'll notice that Jill is now the same size, but the house has changed dramatically. And now we are to scale and continue to build our drawing. Let's take Jill, move her over, and once again press our top down view. First thing we want to do is we want to create the outer walls of the house. Let's get our square tool, and from the bottom right hand corner we'll zoom in and try to grab the black where it meets the gray. Clicking once without dragging, I'll move up and over to the top of the house and find the same black point as it meets the gray. What we want to do now is we want to fill in the additional parts of the house to be covered with our square. Making sure you take your time to snap the endpoints so everything is lined up. Now that we have the floor plan covered, we want this entire shape to be one object. To do so, let's take our eraser tool and carefully erase these 2 lines, giving us one continuous shape all the way around. To make our walls, we'll use our offset tool, and we'll click once and let go and set the distance to 6 inches. This offset is 6 inches to the inside. Make sure you don't go to the outside, as it'll make our foundation too large. Now that we have our walls flat and completed, we can begin to raise them up. Now, before we raise our walls up, let's look at our house. If you look at the parts of the house that go up a full 2 stories, we have our front face on both sides, our side, and the same is true of the back, which is here, and you can see it goes up 2 floors. However, you see this one part of the house that only goes up to 1 floor with a separate roof. This is where we must account for that roof, which you can see just about over here if you look carefully. It only comes up 1 floor, as we must account for this. To do so, this is the part that juts out, and what we want to do is create the walls so that it's separate and we can pull it up individually. All we have to do this is to take our top edge here, connect it down here, and connect our line from here to here. Carefully using our erase tool, we can delete these two lines, and that will give us 1, 2 separate walls that can now be push-pulled to separate heights. This is an important step, so make sure you can click in both spots to get your walls. Once that's verified, click on the inside one time, press delete. Click on the inside one time, press delete. We can now see our floor plan with the two separate floors, and we'll spin it around. If we bring up the picture of our house, you'll notice that we have a deck that starts from here all the way around, which you can also see from your plan view. Now this deck is a 2 feet step up before we actually get to the foundation, so you'll notice that the house starts here, the deck starts here. So what we want to do is we want to account for this distance. Let's do this by bringing up this first part 2 feet. In doing so, we've created an area for the decks to step up. These 2 steps up to the top of the deck will bring us right to this area where the deck will reside. We can also bring up our side house separately as well, and you'll notice this will give us the ability later on to go as tall or as short as we want. Now, before we bring up the next level, which we will use 8 feet for each floor, so that means from the line we just created we'll come up 8 and another 8 for 16, and then we'll worry about the peaks later on. Now when you do this, let's press Control as you drag it up. If you don't press Control, there's no line to delineate the 2 areas. We want this line, so let's press Control one time and start to move up. You'll notice the color of the face changes, and now we have a line to separate where we have the deck and the foundation. We're going to come up 8 feet here, and I'll infer here. Now, the deck is going to go across these areas. However, for these areas, looking back to the house, there is no line, just here. Carefully with your eraser tool, erase this line. You'll notice the face turns purple. You're going to want to right click and reverse the faces. In doing so, you will change it back to the white color. Carefully roll around to each of the remaining sides and complete the same procedure. When finished, the house should look like this. And this area you see here is where we'll bring our deck up to start our deck. So it gives us a nice guideline from this spot moving forward. Now we're going to want to bring the rest of the house up for the second floor. The second floor is going to go up 8 feet from where we stopped the top of our wall, and this will bring us up to this point, and then we'll deal with the peaks once we get there. We will not hold Control this time and just start to move up and use 8 feet as our distance. You'll notice we're not going to bring up this edge because in terms of the first floor, it's going to stop at 8 feet. So our first floor will stop here. We'll delete these lines, giving us our cutout. And our house is starting to take shape. The next part is an extremely important step, as it will set up and make the rest of our drawing be easier to manage and deal with. In doing so, we will be able to create multiple parts of the drawing, hide them at one time or another, and edit different parts should we need. To do this, let's triple click the drawing, and you guessed it, we're going to right click and make it a group. Make sure that as you click it, every single part of the house turns green, blue. Once it's selected, right click and make it a group. Instantaneously you should notice the difference, and now we'll begin to draw the rest of our house, which is the roof, on top of this. The roof will be a separate group on top of the walls, which already should be a group. To start, we're going to make a simple offset all the way around the roof so that rainwater can run off, as you will see in a realistic house. Here's our offset, as you can see here, and all the way around. To start this very carefully, you're going to want to take your square tool and make sure you're moving from the outmost corner and make sure you're snapping to the end point. Snapping to the inside corner will not give you the same results. Once you have snapped all the way around, you'll notice that the box fills in. You'll also notice that this portion hangs over the edge, and we do not want that, but we can't just delete it here, as we'll delete majority of the floor base. Instead, we're going to take our rectangle tool, and from here to here, we're going to select, and now when I delete these two lines, it'll leave this top portion intact. Using our offset tool, we'll click and drag outside of the house for a distance of 6 inches, creating a 6-inch overhang all the way around. Now we'll start with our pencil tool. We want to make sure that we find the midpoint of the outer edge. Be careful, as there are 3 lines here. Make sure you're snapping to the outer edge and moving until you find the midpoint. Once the midpoint is found, come straight up, making sure you're along the blue axis, and this distance will be 8. This distance is consistent with each of the 2 floors below and will give us essentially a 3rd floor. Moving from the outer edge point of the corner, down again, erasing the middle. If you're on the edges, we're in good shape, and next thing we'll do is we're going to take the face and we're going to pull it over. Now when you pull it over, make sure that you hold your control key. Holding control is essential to making the tool work properly. If you don't hold control, you will stop at every single line and you won't be able to drag it all the way over in one shot. Make sure you're inferring to the outer edge line and not the house. The edge of the house is actually before the offset, but the offset itself. Click and turn around. Next we'll put the peak in for the roof edge of the front, finding our midpoint, moving straight up. I'll put this one at 6 feet. We'll do 6 feet here, as you can see that in our drawing, the peak of this roof meets the actual roof itself. It doesn't meet the other peak itself, so we'll do 6, which is 2 feet lower than the first peak. Once again, we'll connect our edges all the way through and use the same procedure, holding control to push pull back and push pull all the way back until we hit the peak and snap to the peak. Orbiting around. Essentially our roof is done. Now you'll notice a couple things. Number one, you have 2 purple faces here. We want to keep them all white, so for this case we're going to right click again and we're going to say reverse faces. That'll turn a purple face white. The other thing is we want to have an edge here to separate these 2 dormers. So what we want to do is, mousing over the front part of the roof, we're going to right click and we're going to intersect the faces with the model. Doing this puts this nice line in here, and now you're able to separate the roofs into 2 equal sections. Alright, now that the base of the roof is created, we're going to go back, and now we want to work with our overhang to create the detail around the edge of the roof and make sure that we offset out from the house itself. We'll start over here by rolling underneath. As you roll underneath, you'll notice that you have a couple parts where you have lines that overlap one another. Let's take our eraser tool and carefully erase these lines. Zoom in to make sure you don't accidentally click the group and have the whole thing go away. There's 2 lines there you should delete, as well as a line here, and this should be the last one. Just double check, move around the house. Now we're going to take this overhang and we're going to push pull it down for 6 inches. If done properly, it should be 6 inches all the way around, except for here, which looks like we missed a line. If this happens, simply come in nice and easily, carefully, delete the lines. We should be in good shape. To create the overhang look of that first peak, I'm going to rotate to the bottom, take our straight line tool, and from the edge, we'll go straight up and straight up again. Roll to the back and do the same thing. Let's try to use the rectangle tool. Okay, now these 2 edges, we're going to push pull for down 6 inches. Remembering that SketchUp can remember the last measurement, so if you just double click, you'll come down here. And now we want to create the peak here so that the top of the roof juts out just a little bit. I need to find my midpoint of my peak, so I'll take my tape measure tool carefully from the edge, click, drag over, and I'll infer right up to my peak, make sure it snaps so that we're in the right place, and that'll create my center point. From the bottom edge of the roof, where the top meets the part that comes down, you want to click and start coming up your line. Now we want this angle to be the same as the angle above it, so if we mouse over and hold it for a second, it does an inference for us, and the purple indicates that it's parallel to the line you just moved over. When the line is parallel, you'll move up to the dotted line. The line will no longer go parallel, but you're still in the same spot. If you want to be sure, you could always drag over the line a little bit and then erase the excess later. I'm going to click there, and if you did it correctly from the other side, we line up. Now to get the overhang, we are going to take the face here, click, and push back to the wall. If you do this, you notice you have a double line here. One line is the top of the wall grouping, this line, and if you pick the top line, you're going to delete the entire group underneath it. Instead, be careful to delete this line. With that completed, we'll move over to the first peak. And much the same way we created that first peak, we're going to take our rectangle tool from point to point. We'll add another square on the other side. And we'll repeat the same procedure of dragging them down for 6 inches. Double click didn't work there, so we'll drag down 6 inches here. And 6 inches here. Use the same process with the front peak as the side peak. The last peak will be done the exact same way, starting at the back edge. Now, with everything separated, we'll take this part of the house and push-pull back. Delete these extra lines as well, being careful that if you erase the last line, they'll all go away. Just remember, Control-Z can take you back, delete it, go from here. At this point, the main roof is completed. What we want to do now is we want to triple-click this roof and right-click it to make it a group. We'll now have 2 groups prior to creating the next step, which will be the roof and overhang over the front deck and side porch. We are now going to create the porch roof that wraps around the side of the house all the way to the front. First thing we want to do is we need to take down by 1 foot this entryway to the house. Remember that since it's inside of a group, or should be inside of a group, we're going to have to double click to make sure we're inside of edit mode. Then using our push-pull tool, we're going to push-pull down for 1 foot. With that distance changed, make sure that you click out of edit mode, as you do not want to draw the porch roof inside of the wall grouping. Using our tape measure tool, we'll carefully rotate around to the underside of the eave and click down a dimension line for 6 feet. We'll do the same up from the top of what will become the deck, And we'll go for 7 feet from the bottom. From here we want to add a couple more guidelines to make sure our drawing is exactly where we want it. On this side over here, we will click and we will drag out for 6 inches. We will drag out on this side for 1 foot. Now make sure when you do this, you can see that my guideline came down instead of out. So I'm going to Control Z and I'm going to make sure that I click and drag off for 1 foot. Okay. Oh, actually, at this point, this line should be 1 foot as well. Let's erase this guideline that we made at 6 inches, and let's change this to 1 foot as well. Alright, now what we want to do is we want to create the underside of the awning that will become the roof. Let's start by taking our straight line tool and pulling out 6 feet. You will then take a straight line down and connect to the guideline that we just drew. Then carefully trace around to the other guideline points up to the wall, making sure you're snapping your lines and creating perfectly straight lines. If done correctly, it will fill in as you see here. Now we're going to create the actual pitched roof that comes down to all the corners. Let's take our square tool, start in the top left corner, and drag down to this spot here. We will then connect from here to here, and now connect the roof down to your edges very carefully. We have one more slight overhang on this section. As you can see from the picture, that roof actually moves over a little bit and is not perfectly in line with this part of the house. What we'll do is we'll take a 2-foot line from the intersection of the roof and this wall, and we'll move it over 2 feet. I'll infer from this intersection, back up, connect, and infer again. Alright, we'll get rid of this extra line we don't need. Carefully orbit around, and there should be another one we can delete here as well. For our roof. Now, we want to give the roof a little bit of detail like we did up here with these eaves. So I'm going to rotate to the bottom, and I'm going to once again use my tape measure tool, and off of each side I'm going to come in for 6 inches from each corner. Alright, now that we have those lines in place with my rectangle tool, or actually choose the pencil tool, we'll click to the intersection points, making sure we don't go all the way to the edge to complete the eave. To double check we did this correctly, let's click on the select tool. If you did, the whole thing will highlight like so, and we can now push-pull this eave down for a total of 6 inches. Alright, at this point we're going to go to edit and delete our guides. So the finished roof should look like this. However, before we move on, we want to also make this part of the roof a group. However, we're actually going to place this roof inside the same grouping as the roof above it. How can we do this? Well, because we have these two things grouped together, all we have to do is to right click on the roof grouping and explode it. As long as you created your walls on the bottom as a separate group, we will still be able to select just this roof and this one. So triple clicking, making sure every single part of it is highlighted. I'm going to press Shift, triple click again, and group it together. Now when we hide this, the entire roof will go away. bring back my roof as it is here. This is a great time to introduce layers. Layers are essentially different pieces of the drawing that we can peel back to see only the sections that we like. We're going to start doing this by going up to our Windows menu and going to our Layers window. This is the window that opens up and can be collapsed. We'll want to have this open. And we also want to go to our View menu under Toolbars, and we have a Layers toolbar as well, which pops open in the top, which is very useful, and we'll see how it works in a moment. As you see in here, you have Layer 0. It's the only layer here, so right now every single thing in the drawing is located on Layer 0. This little checkbox lets us know that it is checked, so this layer, or this piece of the drawing, is visible as you can see. What we want to do is we want to take each of our groups as well as the base and put them on separate layers so we can hide them individually. Carefully go up to the plus sign in the Layers window, click it, and you'll see that another layer will appear named Layer 1. We're going to name this layer Floor Plan. I created the layer. The layer is still visible, but the checkbox next to Layer 0 lets me know that that is the active layer. If I click Floor Plan and make the floor plan the active layer, nothing changes. However, if I click the visible button next to Layer 0, which is no longer active, the entire drawing will go away. Let's bring that back, and what we want to do is make 2 more layers called Roof and Outer Walls. Now, if we select each group, we can actually tell it which layer we want it to be a part of. So for right now, I'm going to select the bottom floor plan. And if you look up in the Layers window, this will tell you what layer you have active currently. So I'm going to take the floor plan, which is currently on Layer 0, as you can tell from the window, hold Shift, and I'm going to select Jill. Since both these objects are selected, I'm then going to go up from my drop-down box where you see all the layers that we just made. We're going to put these onto the floor plan layer, and nothing changes except now these 2 pieces of the drawing are located on the floor plan. As you can tell, if I click here, the top layer and the walls and the roof are still located on Layer 0 because we did not change them. I'm now go back, click the roof, and change it to Layer Roof. And finally, the walls will go to the outer walls. Now you have different pieces of the drawing on different layers. What you can do with this now is hide what you like. Layer 0 has nothing on it. If you click Layer 0, you'll notice it says Visible. If I click it, it doesn't go away because you can never hide the active layer. However, since there's nothing on Layer 0 and it is active, I can go back and hide each part of my drawing so I can only see which one I want to deal with. Click through your layers, making sure the ones you want to hide are the ones that are going away as you click. If, for instance, you have the roof and the wrong layer, you can always just go back and select the roof or whatever part it is and change it to the layer you wish it to go to. This is a great way to help keep our drawing organized as well as speed up the program as the models get more intense and more detailed.